look at Russia's ambitions, and I totally agree that Russia's victory or defeat with Ukraine will mean only a step forward in its imperial ambitions already, not only in its near neighborhood, but beyond. But I really think that the support that EU and NATO allies granted to Ukraine was very important in that attacking with the right commas Russia.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If I may, from a military perspective, it's quite easy to organize, let me say, active action against Ukraine, against Russia on the territory of this country, against leadership like a psychological operation or info operation or something like this. It is applicable, of course, but how complicated it is, I understood. Let me use one case from my military career. We practicing targeting many times. And one of my idea was to be so close to the real environment as how it is only possible. We decided to practice targeting process against one of the element of Russian infrastructure in Kaliningrad Oblast, very close, like a ship with LNG, theoretically Russian ship with LNG. And to practice it, we decided to use the cyber tools for that. After analysis by cyber warriors, they introduced me the analysis, and appeared that it was a Russian, under the flag of Russia, ship, but produced by Southern Korea with software of Finland. So sometimes attacking Russia on the territory is very much complex and complicated, and needs international agreement, international understanding, and international leadership, let me say, just to do it effectively and appropriately. Thank you.
I don't think we have to take that step. I think it's unnecessary. Ukraine's doing enough. But let me ask you, what would happen in this battle between Ukraine and Russia if all of a sudden the United States and Europe were to impose secondary sanctions against any country that did trade with Russia? What would that do to Russia's war machine? It would lock it down. What would happen if we did the same thing the Russians are doing to our information networks, and we did it to their information networks? What if we went on the offensive in terms of information warfare and started mucking around in their politics, supporting their dissidents, generating opposition, not even generating, fueling opposition in Russia to the war? We did that during the Cold War. Why aren't we doing that now? I mean, we're in Romania. Romania's experienced an onslaught of Russian disinformation attacks and cyber intrusions. We, the United States, have experienced that. Most countries in Europe have experienced that. Why aren't we going on the offensive instead of just crouching defensively against this information warfare? Those two things alone would change the game significantly in the battle between Russia and Ukraine. I think it would be enough to actually put Ukraine into the position where it has the initiative. We're just not demonstrating the political will to undertake these steps. We're too afraid of higher gas prices. We have a misunderstanding of the dynamics of escalation in this conflict. We're deterring ourselves from enabling Ukraine to win this war. And we need to act now, because I have to say, I don't think time is on Ukraine's side. I don't think time is on our side. Look at the reconstitution of Russian military forces. They're producing more tanks than we are. Even though I know tanks aren't essential, they're still important. They're getting as good as the Ukrainians are in drone warfare. They have more men in the army than they did in February 2022 too. And those trend lines are continuing. So we're losing our moment of opportunity by being so passive.
So we have a question in the back right, gentleman in the back right, and if we're down to our last several minutes, so if there are other questions in the room, we'll take 2 or 3 and do a last round. So please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the discussion. This is Shota Guineria from the Baltic Defense College, and I wanted to zoom out a little bit from this information warfare into the cognitive warfare, because now Putin has a perfect example of how he pushed little Georgia to the point when Georgia actually gave up its defenses voluntarily on its own. So what he's hoping to do, thinking that the cognitive domain is the only domain where he does have a real advantage, that he actually wants to do the same thing with Ukraine and stretch this and bleed this to the point where actually nobody is able to maintain the level of support Ukraine needs to be in the fight, right? So from this perspective, when we now have two Belarusias helping Putin instead of one, and this little problem of Georgia has added to the bigger problem that we have, what will it take for the policymakers to actually analyze that the cognitive domain is the defining domain, and if you do not have enough invested in there, then you have the lower hand in all the other domains too? Thank you.
Other questions? Otherwise, we'll answer that one, which is, oh, yes, ma'am, right there.
Thank you very much. I have a short question. We observe now very dangerous trend that autocratic regimes begin more resilient even than democracy. One of the reasons for this is that also autocratic regime don't need approval from international law or from the UN, and they don't need a long bureaucracy procedure to make a decision. They just agreed and do what they need. So what do you think? What should we do to increase resilience of democracy?
So cognitive domain and democratic resiliency, we have about 5 minutes left, so if I could ask you to keep your answers to 30 to 60 seconds.
I don't know about cognitive defense, not much about it, so I cannot answer, but I can tell you that, you know, what is why tyranns and autocracies actually winning at this point of time? Because they are helping each other. They are united as much as they can. Russia is not fighting alone on a battlefield with Ukraine. They are fighting with North Korean soldiers, more than 10,000 on the battlefield and more than 40,000 on the training camps in Russia. They are fighting with the North Korean missiles on our civilians and many other things, you know, that North Korea, Iran, drones, and China satellites and intelligence data are fully supplied, Russia fully supplied with it. And when Ukraine asking NATO to cover Western cities, but air defense, we are not asking to fight for us. We are asking to protect civilians on the border, Romania, Poland, just to cover by air defense, just to protect civilians, not to go in the military field. And they're saying no. That's the answer. Who is winning? Democracy losing, because you need to fight for democracy every day for your values and for your democracies. Unfortunately, this is not the case. It's much easier to sit on a sofa in a very fancy restaurant, drinking wine and giving advices. Thank you. Sorry if I am rude.
So, two important questions. Very often met these days in each and every policy maker agenda. I think it's important. When I was referring to this conflict, saying this is a comprehensive conflict, what we are seeing in Ukraine, ranging from conventional to hybrid to propaganda to economic to energy and so on, I was also referring to cognitive domain. This is absolutely clear. And yes, there is a lot of space to do more also in this domain, because this is part of the picture. Sometimes it's taking the central stage, and we are just neglecting in some parts. The other question, resilience, yes, this is, you know, already very high on the agenda, also in NATO, also in EU, in national agendas. But resilience is what I said also earlier, is about strength. It's about strength to resist in front of challenges, of threats and risks that seems to be today, nowadays, like cocktails of threats and risk. And we are not talking here about Russia. We are talking about China, we are talking about Iran, we are talking about North Korea. And this is very much multidimensional, I will say it again, and we have to be very much prepared.
Thank you.
If I may, of course, we hear many times that Russia is very active in the so-called cognitive domain, and why we do not answer for that? Because sometimes we are a victim of our, let me say, very systematic structural approach. Like if we define something is conducting in the, let me say, cognitive domain, we need to define it. We have to establish some procedures, some definitions, some institutions responsible for that, agree our actions, and after that take the actions. So this kind of approach, I'm thinking about Polish perspective. This kind of approach making us victim of such kind of, we are not active like Russia is active, we are just reactive. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, final word to you.
You know what makes the difference between successful democracies and unsuccessful democracies? It's leadership. And I hark back to the title of this panel, Churchill or Chamberlain. You know, today I'm seeing signs in Europe of possible Chamberlains. I'm looking at the UK, I'm looking at France, I'm looking at Poland. They're beginning to demonstrate signs of Churchill-like leadership. Willingness to do something that's unpopular, willingness to stand up for more responsibility. My only concern is, will they act fast enough? I have my fingers crossed on that. Because if they do, they've got the capacity to really enable Ukraine to end this war on its terms.
Great. So good to end on a semi-hopeful note there. Hopefully more Churchills emerge in Europe and elsewhere. So thank you to my panelists, my fellow panelists. Thank you to the New Strategy Center. Thank you to all of you in the audience for your attention and your questions. Please stick around. We'll take a short break to reset, and the next panel is Post-War Challenges to EU Border Security. Thank you.